Hello, it is May 1st, and I've decided to create a webcam video rather than write a paper, given that it seems like it would be far more productive to have the theorists speak um, out loud, given that I'm good at talking to myself, um, rather than have me fumble around trying to write an epic poem at 2 in the morning, the day after the assignment is due. Um, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Thomas Hobbes, Niccolo Machiavelli, and Nancy Hirschman, and have them obviously talk about a few of the concepts we've covered in class and a few concepts that they cover in their books. Now, I'm going to start off talking mostly about Hobbes and Machiavelli because they have a lot more in common in their theories. They talk about the foundings of states and about the purpose of them. And then I'm going to flow into Hirschman and include all of them in a talk about freedom and the duties of citizenship and government that come with those. So to start off, I'm going to talk about killing the sons of Brutus and how Hobbes and Machiavelli would view this act. Now, killing the sons of Brutus is a reference to an event early in Roman history. Lucius Brutus, who was a forerunner of Marcus Brutus, who ended up assassinating Caesar with the E2 Brute kind of deal. Lucius was a aristocrat in the early Roman monarchy, and Brutus means dim-witted in Latin, and he basically pretended to be an idiot for a while when he was friends with the monarch Superbus Tarquinius. And what he ended up doing was, after the rape of one of his female friends, he declared that Rome would never have a ruler again, and expelled the Tarquins from Rome, and basically founded the Roman Republic on his own. It's kind of a legendary act in Roman history. And what he ended up doing later was his sons tried to bring back the former tyrant because they realized that they had benefited far more in the previous government, under the previous government's rule, than they did in the Republic, as they had no kind of unfair benefits. And they would basically try to betray this young republic. And what Lucius ended up doing was condemning and presiding over the execution of his own sons, and he basically showed his enemies that the republic, although young, was not to be fucked with. And so Machiavelli obviously likes this. He was a big fan of what he calls virtue, and it has a touch of ruthlessness in it, but it's basically death before dishonor, and being a traitor means you have to die. And given that Lucius was basically founding a new government, he says that you need a memorable event to seal and stamp in the minds of your citizens that there's no going back, and that you are serious about ruling. Now, for Machiavelli, it's not really a matter of being cruel. You're not being cruel by killing your sons. It may seem like it from a kind of naive view, but what he's really saying is you need to be strict and consistent in your application of the law and its enforcement. And he basically says the institution is far more important than the people. The office is far more important than the people holding the office, and you cannot allow for holders of public offices to grant favors to their friends. He says you can't let private interests override that of the public. You're allowed to do violent acts. You're allowed to, kill your sons. You're allowed to slay Romulus. But all of these can be done as long as it's for the public good and not for private interest. Now, Hobbes, on the other hand, believes that the sovereign, and by extrapolation, probably the sovereign's family, would be above the law. He says this because in order for the sovereign to have absolute power and to prevent a falling back into state of nature, he needs to be able to be flexible to stop any early signs of civil war, and he needs to basically do anything he needs to do and not be. Hobbes basically says it's more important for the sovereign to prevent the falling into the state of nature than it is to follow laws. And only he can do that. He's allowed to do anything, obviously, to prevent a fall into the state of nature. But I think enough said. In any case, important parts. Hobbes doesn't really talk in the founding of the Leviathan. He speaks of it as a contract, which it is, but he never really gives events. Unlike Machiavelli, he's not referring to history. It's all abstract, and he does not say that you need to kind of set in people's mind the event in which there's no going back. It's not the execution of all the Romans in Russia or anything like that. It's not killing your sons. Hobbes has a nice abstract, clear cut, but also not historically minded view of how government comes to be. And I mean, it's a matter of personal opinion, I suppose, but I kind of like how Machiavelli talks about real foundings of empires, because there's obviously going to be blood. Okay, part 2. I didn't realize I was going to need to edit. However, my flag fell down, so I had to put it back up. So I've divided this into a few parts. Okay, anyway. The next topic is I'm going to talk about Hobbes and Machiavelli and their degrees of tolerance for kind of dissent within zones of freedom, zones of non-interference. And I mostly talk about this just out of personal interest. I've always wondered what to do when you're a ruler, or any sort of government, and you have people within your empire or country who are basically all of their arguments kind of outline you no longer existing. For instance, if you're a member of the bourgeois and you have communists in your country and their plan is to kill you and redistribute your land, what exactly are you supposed to do? You don't want to have a red terror where you scare everyone off and kind of undermine your own ideas of freedom, but you also don't want to leave it to the point where you are overthrown, and you're either beheaded or stabbed with a fucking pitchfork. Anyway, so for Hobbes, we obviously have the idea that we have the sovereign, and he has the ultimate power at any point to maintain the Leviathan and to not allow it to fall into the state of nature. However, you also have to remember that the Leviathan is based on a contract, which in turn is based on the first law of nature, which is that you're allowed to preserve yourself beyond everything. So as soon as the sovereign decides that you're a threat to the existence of the Leviathan, you no longer have to be part of that Leviathan. And he'll probably kill you if he can, but you might be able to bail and say, I don't want to be a part of your Leviathan anymore. I will, take my arm or finger, what have you, part of the overall artificial man, and bail. But odds are, he'd probably kill you. And I guess it's a matter of whether you're seceding or whether you're rebelling. But you don't want to be rebelling under Hobbes. However, it's slightly, it's not better or worse. It's different under Machiavelli. Machiavelli wants a state to have institutions that allow for a lot of dissent. So unlike Hobbes, you're not going to be afraid of voicing mere opinions and being censored all the time. However, under Machiavelli, Machiavelli ultimately is seeking stability anyway. He basically says you're going to have conflicts, so make institutions that allow people to talk. However, for Machiavelli, you also have to remember that you have your citizens with public virtue, and the people's voice is the voice of God. So ultimately, if the government is incompetent enough to warrant a revolution, Machiavelli also gives a kind of green light, saying if you need to refound your ideas of freedom, if your population has become corrupt, if your government has become useless, um, it's not only tolerated; it's a matter of being kind of a Republican and having Machiavelli's sense of virtue to overthrow the old republic and and renew it with kind of remind yourself of what you fought for early on and what your principles are supposed to be. So just to kind of summarize, because that was kind of a convoluted segment. Under Hobbes and under Machiavelli, you have different degrees of freedom. Um, you have kind of negative liberty in both. However, under Hobbes, he's although he says the only thing the sovereign really has to do is not allow you to fall in the state of nature, he also is allowed and kind of encouraged to stop anything he views as being threatening to the Leviathan. So he's going to censor you, and he's going to kill you if you sound like you're going to rebel. Machiavelli, on the other hand, tries to channel any dissenting ideas, or not dissenting. He basically says they're constructive. If there's something wrong, let us find a way to compromise and seek a way to get past any problems without killing each other. Because that's the main thing. They both want stability. They both don't want civil war to happen. But Machiavelli says eventually you are allowed to fall into the state of nature and renew the republic, and that's one thing Hobbes is not wanting to have happen.